Hey guys, welcome to today's interview. This is the first of many, hopefully, one-on-one interviews with titans of the industry, people that are making the miniature hobby that you guys know and love. So today we'll be sitting down with CreatureCaster co-founder Peter Adams. He was one of the original co-founders of CreatureCaster, and we're going to catch up with him on all things that they've been up to, including their crazy Kickstarter that just launched about a few weeks ago. As always, if you guys are enjoying the content, please make sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Really helps out the channel. And the episode will always be available as podcast form, if that's what you prefer, on all your regular podcasting places. So with that said, let's get in the episode. All right, hello everyone. Welcome to a very special interview. Today we have one of the founders and CEO of Canadian miniature manufacturer CreatureCaster, Peter Adams. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jim. Awesome to be here. Very excited.
How are you?
It's been a crazy couple of weeks, but I'm doing really good. Yeah, it's very exciting.
Yeah, I know you guys have been super busy. Obviously, you have your brand new Kickstarter, which congratulations, by the way, which we're going to get into a bit later. But that's obviously probably been keeping you guys really busy.
Yeah, absolutely. That's definitely the focus right now, although we still have other CreatureCaster goodies on the way as well. So it's there's a lot going on.
That's amazing. All right, so I just wanted to kind of ask a few questions first. Now, I've obviously been aware of CreatureCaster for a very long time. In fact, I think I was aware of Kickstarter all the way back to as far as the very first Kickstarter. You guys the company actually started via Kickstarter about, I think, around 2015, and I know the company's changed a lot since then. And that time was filled with a lot of challenges, especially in those early years from my recollection. So tell me a little bit about those early years and kind of how you got involved and what the journey's been like to get CreatureCaster from that point, that like very first Kickstarter, to where you guys are today. Like, what's that been like, and what were some of those challenges in those early years?
Yeah, so that was kind of back in the early days of Kickstarter even. So it was before Kickstarter was, nearly not nearly as well known as it is now. And it was the original founder of the company was a friend, Jeremy, and he ran that initial Kickstarter. And then I became involved when it started getting towards the logistics of delivering everything that the Kickstarter needed to deliver. And I kind of got involved, I think it was a year after the Kickstarter had concluded, and there were certain problems with figuring out how the manufacturing was going to happen and how the logistics around delivery was going to happen. And so it was the first Kickstarter was definitely a challenging process. It was there was a lot to deal with, but we managed to come out of that, creating our own manufacturing. We built our own facility. We improved the process to make it as streamlined as we possibly could. And we were able to, fully deliver on that Kickstarter, get it out to everybody. And since then, we moved very quickly into retail after that. And we've released, I don't know, I think 30 models since then. So I think the original Kickstarter had 8 models in it. And then since then, we have at least 30 more sort of large models and a bunch of smaller models. And things have just kept growing, and we're releasing things faster and faster. And yeah, it's been very exciting with that. We've built up our own logistics network. So, back then it was a lot harder to find delivery services and logistics company to handle all the delivery. So that was probably the roughest part of the first Kickstarter. And now, that's not something that we worry about at all, because we have warehouses in sort of all the major hubs, and we're able to deliver directly from our warehouses to our customers.
Right. And, and so how did you initially get involved with the company? Like, obviously, you mentioned that there's other co-founders. So like, when did you kind of come in, and kind of how did you get involved? Was this something that you kind of were aware of from the very beginning? Or is this something like, was it your dream to always be involved in something like this? Because I think for a lot of people that are kind of involved in the miniature hobby as a whole, being involved at kind of that ground level is something that's very sounds really cool, but actually turning that into a career or a company is actually a whole different ballgame. So tell me a little bit about kind of your history and how you got involved with CreatureCaster and kind of how that started.
Yeah, so it's definitely a bit of a right place, right time with how everything was going with the Kickstarter. And for me, I was actually in school. I was studying to do my pre-med because I was looking at med school, and I was kind of just in the middle of that when the Kickstarter first launched. So I was, not involved. The other founder of the company, Simon, he was heavily involved in sort of the production side of things. So originally it was just Jeremy. Jeremy had looked for different production methods. He ended up reaching out to Simon, see if Simon could do the production, and then after that, they ended up reaching out to me because they were still trying to get everything figured out with how all the production was going to come together and how it was going to get delivered. So as I said, I joined pretty late into the process of the Kickstarter, so we had some less resources than we would have liked by the time that I got involved, and we sort of pulled all of that together. I ended up, I just finished school, so it was good timing, and I ended up sort of putting 6 months of work into the company. We weren't getting paid anything during that time, so it was really a labor of love that we wanted to get this company launched, get it started, and sort of the deal was that in exchange for the work that we were doing to have the production and complete the Kickstarter, that we would become the owners of the company. And so that was the process that we went through, and it was definitely a challenging time, but it was sort of, yeah, a once in a lifetime opportunity. So we were all super excited. We were really happy to be involved with it, and when we were able to start producing those models and seeing them come out of our own facility, and we, I mean, it's a feeling that probably a lot of hobbyists dream about, and we actually got to do it. So I think that was yeah, one of the best moments in my life for sure.
That's awesome. All right, we're back with Peter Adams from CreatureCaster, and he was just telling us about kind of his start in the CreatureCaster and kind of how that got going. And so, Peter, a lot of people who are involved in this hobby, they look at all the companies that are making miniatures, and there's actually a lot of them these days, especially with 3D printing and all the various Kickstarters and stuff like that. I think it's one of probably the most common thing I see on Kickstarter in my sphere is like lots of miniatures and stuff. Now, tell me a little bit about the process that you guys have from like concepting to design to sculpting, casting miniature. Because I think sometimes people, you guys are still doing traditional resin sculpting. It's not, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the new technology that you guys are going to bring with the Kickstarter in a little bit, but talk to me a little bit about that process, like from, how long does that typically take from a model to go from, say, like an idea to a finished product? And like, what does that look like right now? Like, do you guys have, various artists? Do you have, is everyone kind of doing a little bit of everything? Or like, what is that process like? Because I think a lot of people, when they look at how miniatures are manufactured, we don't actually know a lot about it, right? You kind of get the models and you're like, okay, that's cool. But like, there's very little like known about that actual process. So tell us a little bit about the process that you guys go through when you guys decide, okay, it's time to make a new sculpt or new model.
Yeah, so that's a great question. It's for CreatureCaster, we kind of do things, I think, differently than some other companies do. One of the important parts for us was we really wanted to try and maintain a core team, a core design team, a core creative team. And I mean, even with our production, we really like to maintain our staff. We try and avoid turnover. So, these are things that we think end up leading to sort of the quality that CreatureCaster has become known for. So right now, Jeremy left the company several years back now. So he's moved on to other projects. And right now, I'm the creative director. We have Alex Boca. He's our concept artist. He's our art director. And so a lot of the ideas are coming from we also kind of like have these brainstorming sessions with a lot of the management of the team. So I think we kind of have probably about 6 or 7 people who are generating ideas. We've expanded that now, so we actually have we've opened creative meetings up for everybody who works for CreatureCaster. Has an opportunity to come and talk about what they would like to see CreatureCaster doing, ideas that they have, and we take some of those ideas and we develop them. We discuss the ideas with them. So the idea formation has become a very collaborative collaborative part of what CreatureCaster does, and yeah, we try and involve as much of the team as we possibly can into that. From there, we take those, and Alex does all of the concepts that we have. He's just a phenomenal concept artist and just an amazing artist in general. So he's our basically all of our art content right now is generated from Alex, and we then take that. We have a team of sculptors. We have Miguel and Victor, and they've been with us from sort of day one nearly, right? So since almost immediately after moving to retail, these are guys that we brought on, and they've been growing with us and growing with the company. And I think their sculpting is just gets better and better. And I think they're really at the top of the sculpting game, in the world. So we're really happy to have them as part of the team. And that's our basic process. So we come up with a concept that goes to the sculptors. They're working on it. We meet, regularly. We meet every day, actually, with the entire creative team. We give feedback on where the sculpt is. We make little changes. The entire sculpting process, I mean, it really depends on the model, right? So, we have models that we've spent 3 months sculpting. We have models that we've spent, I would say at minimum, we're looking at 2 to 3 weeks if it's a small model. I think we put a lot of time in our sculpts, a lot more than what I know some other companies are putting into their sculpts. And I think again that detail sort of shows, and the attention to anatomy, the attention to scale. These are the things that we take pretty seriously, and we put the time in to try and get it right.
Yeah, and so once a model has and I assume obviously nowadays everyone's using computers, so most of the sculpts are done in 3D rather than the green stuff. They're not making green stuff masters at this point, right? Because I do remember even seeing some of the original 3D renders. Obviously, all the stuff that you guys do is 3D rendered as well, if I'm correct. So from that point, how does that then get turned into a model? Like, is there a lot of trial and error to like figure out where to cut it? Because I know that's a big part of model, I guess, creation is like, how do I cut this model and where is it going to glue together and all that kind of stuff. So what does that look like, that actual taking that 3D model and actually turning it into like a real model?
Yeah. So if anybody's interested in the sort of that 3D process, I definitely recommend, you would want to be looking at ZBrush. That's the sort of go-to 3D sculpting program that everybody uses now. So, once we have our ZBrush 3D sculpt, the next step of that process is that we're going to do a test print. So, right now everybody has a lot of sort of home printers, and this is sort of our test printed right here. It's an upcoming model, so a little sneak preview.
World exclusive, guys.
This is the first time anyone's seen it outside of CreatureCaster, I think.
That's amazing.
So that's what we print that off on kind of like the same sort of printer that people sometimes have in their home now.
Mm-hmm.
We then look at the scale. So then we're taking that scale, we're comparing it to all the other models. We try and do that a lot in 3D, but what we found is that it's really difficult to do that in 3D, right? So it even though you might think it looks really great in 3D, till you actually print it out and you're able to hold it in your hand and put it side by side with another model, you can't really get a full picture of what that looks like. So once we have that sort of test model that we've printed and we are happy with the scale, it might take 2 or 3 prints to get the scale sort of right where we want it.
And sorry, Peter, and just I have a question. So when you mean scale, are you just talking about the general scale, or do you guys actually go back and maybe like increase, like say the hand or the arm or the weapon seems a bit small, so you might just readjust certain parts of it versus the whole model? Like, is that are those kinds of things happening as well, or is it more just like the total prints, the total size of the model when you say scale?
Yeah, so it's both. So absolutely. So you can see here we've had this staff. It's kind of taken a little turn for the worse here. So we know, like, okay, that's too skinny, right? So that's something that we're going to increase the size of. When you're sculpting in 3D, it's difficult to see that because everything looks so perfectly proportionate in your 3D sculpt.
Right.
But when you actually print it out, things have to be distorted. You have to make hands a little bit bigger than they're going to be in real life, or sometimes a lot bigger. You have to make those staffs so you'd be walking around with a 2x4 if you increase the scale to be accurate. But it looks good when it's a miniature, right? It looks appropriate, and you don't have any of those problems. And then there's sort of the overall scale. So with this guy, these are two. This guy's a smaller infantry. This one's sort of a larger champion. So we're looking at those types of scales and seeing how they just fit in the overall range. They'll be checking out skulls, checking out heads. Is this a human head? Is it within the range of what a human head would be? All of those little things are something that we're looking at. Hands are always complicated. We are always trying to make really cool, delicate hands that have a lot of expression in them. But that means your fingers are super tiny, and that doesn't always work, right? So there's a lot of balance that goes in there of how far you can push the medium, and in order to get the final effect that you want.
Right, and then obviously, once you guys have settled on that kind of final, I guess, version, then it obviously goes to mold. I presume they cut it somehow. You guys decide kind of the best way to glue it together and cut it, and then off to mold making, I presume.
Yeah, so that goes then back into the 3D program. We have Simon is the other founder. He's basically an expert at mold making now. He's really knows where it's great to cut. So we're kind of doing that as a team again, where we're sort of marking out where we want the cuts to be. And then all of that gets passed over to the sculptor, who is then going to put the actual cuts into the model. And again, this is another phase where there could be some back and forth. So we're looking at those sculpts in 3D, and we're saying, okay, now we've got it all cut up. Do these cuts look right? Like, are we going to be able to? Where the channel's going to go? Where the sprue's going to go?
Right.
How are the vents going to work on this? And so there's a big analysis part that goes in there in order to make sure all of that is going to line up into the mold correctly. And again, that might be some back and forth where we're like, okay, that looks good. These we're not printing out as test pieces anymore. So these are going into we're now in sort of the final print, which is on our much more expensive and high-tech printer that kind of has a nicer surface finish. It has sharper details. It sort of allows us to kind of like really, again, get some of those precise and precision parts that CreatureCaster is known for.
Right, that's awesome. And you've mentioned printers a few times, so obviously that's a huge kind of disruptor in the industry right now. A lot of people are getting home printers. I see obviously STL files is kind of a very common thing these days. And so, where do you guys see CreatureCaster in that, I guess, landscape moving into the future? Because some companies are obviously just like, for me personally, I live in a small place. I could never have a 3D printer. Like, it stinks, and I need all this thing, and it's just too much work for me. I'd rather just buy the model. But for a lot of people, 3D printing has become like a huge part of their hobby, their miniature hobby. So do you see CreatureCaster ever kind of dipping their toes in that space? Maybe there's or is that something that, like, you guys have talked about? I'm sure every miniature company has had discussions about kind of how they're going to adapt to that new, I guess, world, of 3D printing. So what does that look like for CreatureCaster?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a really exciting time. I think 3D printing is really going to change the world, not just within our hobby, but, all sorts of manufacturing is potentially going to end up with a 3D printed type of model. Right now, when we're looking at it, it's the home 3D printers aren't able to capture the detail we want, right? So we have looked at that. We are always looking at it. We're always waiting for the moment when you're going to have a home 3D printer and the model we print looks the same as the model we're printing off of our we use an EnvisionTech per factory system, and that's definitely out of the price range of your average person. So like, once those two things become equal, then that would be, there wouldn't be much need for doing the type of manufacturing we do. But the way it is right now, we can't have that level of detail. We'd have to change everything about how we sculpt, right? So we would have to exaggerate things much more than we do. We would have to have more coarse detail. Like, we would have to be it's a different style of sculpting if you are going to make something that looks really good on that home 3D printer. So, it doesn't fit into our workflow or what we want to offer as a product just yet, but it's something that we're very interested in. And, we're definitely keeping our eye on that side of the industry.
Yeah, there's definitely like there's from my perspective, when I look at 3D printed models, there's definitely a style to them, like of like the broadly available ones, and it is this very kind of like chunky, kind of clunky, like very kind of thick. It feels almost like I'm looking at like World of Warcraft sprites or something like that. Like they're very like boxy almost, and not like terrible. And obviously it's gotten crazy. Like the advancement I've seen in the last 3 years in 3D printing has been crazy. But for someone like me, and I think for me, 3D printing is still very niche, and like I still personally would rather spend my time building the models and painting the models, not printing the models. And I got rid of my like home paper printer many years ago, and I'd never have a printer again. So hopefully that doesn't mean I have to get a 3D printer in the future.
I mean, it is, a factor to consider. I think 3D printing is a hobby in itself, right?
Right.
So, if you're going to spend the time setting up your printer, you're going to spend the time setting up the print. You're going to print out your file. You're going to have to then, remove the model from the print bed, and you are going to remove all the supports. And there's a whole different process that is associated with that than what we may have been traditionally using as a basis for our hobby, right? And
Right.
so I think it's cool. I think there's going to be a lot of people who enjoy 3D printing, but there are downsides, right? I mean, you are dealing with a vat of resin and a printer that makes noise, and it runs for 24 hours, and some people have space for that and some people don't have space for that. So yeah, I think it's an exciting time. I think it's going to obviously continue to evolve and continue to get better, and sooner or later it will be, noiseless, odorless, no supports,
Yeah, exactly.
perfect model fidelity. And at that point in time, I think we would be all over doing 3D printed things. But right now, it's not there. Even our most expensive, this printer we have is, we still spend probably 80 hours of work, taking that 3D print and making it as perfect as we can. Sometimes we have to do hand sculpting. Sometimes we're cleaning. Sometimes we're sanding. There's still a lot more work that goes into that print after it comes off the print bed, to get things as perfect as we can possibly make it before we start casting it. So, you know, it's um, it's it's definitely not the same as a model that we cast. If we were to just give you the file and you would just print it on your home printer, it would still look like a cool model. But if you put it next to the model that we had on the good printer and that we did the cast of, it would look blurry, right? It would look like it was out of focus, and
Right.
it just wouldn't have the same crispness and the same detail and that we're able to achieve.
Absolutely. All right. So, you guys, I hope, are proudly Canadian. So, has there been
We
many
are.
challenges? Like, what kind of challenges have you guys had to deal with being a company based in Canada? Because I know, like, it's hard to sometimes to even get certain products in Canada that are made in the States. So, have you guys had to
Mm.
deal with a lot of kind of, shipping and manufacturing and kind of, like difficulties, or is that something that's been fairly smooth?
It definitely adds like another layer of challenge, probably mostly time related, right? Like, you can get stuff, it just takes longer. There's times when we've had stuff delivered to the border and had to drive down to the border to pick it up because we couldn't get it shipped into Canada, or it would have like quadrupled the costs to get it shipped into Canada. So,
Right.
we just gone and picked it up. We're located in a pretty ideal spot. We're about an hour and a half from the border, so before COVID, it was quite easy to head down there when we needed to get something specific. Um, we're also positioned actually really well in terms of the global free trade market, right? So we have free trade with the U.S. We just signed the free trade agreement with Europe. We have free trade with the UK. So like Canada has a lot of good and positive trade relations, and so that has actually been beneficial for us overall.
Yeah.
Um, the world is constantly changing and evolving, and so those are definitely maybe the less fun side of the business, is when you're looking at the logistics and you're figuring out shipping, and now your shipping's getting delayed by a month because of the whole COVID environment, and that's going to affect your release date. So there's a lot of logistical challenges there that are not not fun to deal with, but I think we've got we've learned enough about it that doesn't really trouble us too much anymore.
That's yeah. I mean, I mean, it's hard enough to try to get like certain products from the States, so I can imagine that having an actual company that manufactures here is difficult too. So what would you say some of the biggest misconceptions are when it comes, obviously people look at, hey, like I'm going to go work for a company that makes miniatures, manufactures them. Like that sounds amazing. What would you say some of the biggest misconceptions are when it comes to that, as far as, people's ideas? Because I'm sure they probably think it's fun all the time, but talking to Simon, I talked to Simon quite a bit. I've actually known Simon for like almost 20 years, from when way back in the day. So every time I talk to him, he seems like he's out of breath, even over text message. So I know he's working his butt off. So what would you say some of the biggest misconceptions are, or things that people maybe get wrong about being in this industry?
It's not an easy job. I mean, it is a job that I love and that I am super happy to be involved in, but it's definitely not an easy job. You are having to do a little bit of everything. So, I'm not sitting in an office most of the day, or like I'm not just sitting in an office and not doing other things, right? So like I just have 20 tasks on the go all at the same time, working on the creative direction stuff and working on logistics, making sure shipments arrive, checking over the customer service. So, I think when any company starts to scale, there's all sorts of challenges that are associated with that. And it doesn't matter, even though this is a really cool subject and a really cool area to be working in, the business aspects, and anybody who's started their own business, and you're very experienced with that, I know, it's not easy, right? There's a lot of demands on your time. You're working all sorts of hours, and you're generally working multiple jobs. And I think in this particular industry, it's very competitive. There's, as you said, a lot of options out there for people to look at for miniatures. There's a lot of passion, so there's a lot of people who are working, willing to work those extra hours, and so you're competing with people who are fanatics, right? We're all fanatics of the hobby. We all love the hobby, so you're entering into an area that is a difficult business, but it is incredibly rewarding. I love it. I wouldn't trade it for anything. But there's probably easier ways to make money.
Absolutely. All right, let's talk Kickstarter. So Judgement Eternal Champions is the official name. I believe it launched April 27th. Yes. And as of this recording, you guys are over $390,000 pledged. So first of all, how relieved are you? How does that feel? Congratulations.
Thanks. Yeah, I mean, basically right up until the week before the Kickstarter, I hadn't even thought about it when we were so busy getting everything ready. And then the week before the Kickstarter, you have like this sudden anxiety attack of like, what if no one likes this? What if what if no one wants to get involved? What if we've done all this work and it just flops? So we don't particularly want to use the Kickstarter platform in general, right? We went into retail. We've been releasing models. We're happy that's structured. We enjoy that structure. There's not the same pressures of deadlines, and if we think we need to extend something, we can extend something without it having big consequences on like a massive project like the Kickstarter. So it's definitely was a lot of anxiety going into it, but then I think we were funded in 10 minutes. So then I was like, okay, that's good. We're funded. And then, by the end of the first day, I think we were at 220 something around that mark anyway. So we were happy, right? Like we were like, okay, the anxiety is over. Everything has gone according to plan. People are responding really well. I don't like looking at it, so I just walked away for the entire day and came back and I was like, okay, it's good, so that's it's really exciting when you see that there's the community response, when it's something that you've put a lot of work into, and you get the reward. The Necromancer Dragon was the same way. I mean, that sculpt I think we were working on it for 6 months.
That's incredible. Yeah. I know
Yeah.
why you guys don't do like it's limited, because I can imagine it's just a huge nightmare to cast.
Yeah, I mean, the intention is not for it to be limited. It's just it's a lot of casting work, right? So and that is, one of the challenges with resin is that everything is poured by hand. It's a time-consuming process. It creates beautiful models, and most people love the material that we're using, but it's not the easiest material to work in for sure. And yeah, that was again 6 months that you're investing into something. We didn't know what the reception was going to be. It was the biggest model we'd ever made. It was the most expensive model we ever made. And we were like, is there going to be a demand for something that is, it's awesome and everyone's going to love looking at it, but how many people are actually going to want to buy it at this high price point? And then we sold out in I think 8 hours. So it was more popular than we could have possibly imagined. So we've had we've had really great response to the I think the quality that we're trying to put into stuff, right? So that's always been what we're focused on, is having a super high quality sculpt and a super high quality product. And sometimes that's more expensive than other products, but I think we also try to be very reasonable, for what we're offering. And I think we've had just incredible enthusiasm behind our releases.
That's amazing. All right. We're back with Peter Adams from CreatureCaster. So Peter, I mentioned at the very start of this interview that you guys were a miniature company, but now you are a game company. So how long have you guys been thinking of getting into the gaming side of the space? And how did it come to pass that you guys partnered with Gunmeister Games, I believe, to produce Judgement? And kind of what's their current relationship with you guys? Is it still two separate teams? Is it all one company now? So what does that look like? And kind of what was that, I guess, like process like to get into, to create your own game essentially?
Yeah, so I mean, I think most gamers have played around with creating their own scenarios, having ideas for games, you talk about it. So it's something that we've always wanted to do from day one, and we're just too busy, right? I mean, we're so busy that we've not been able to complete the full rules for a game of our own. We have different things that are in progress. And we'd been talking to Gunmeister for quite a while, since the first Adepticon. I think it was in 2017, and they're great guys. We got along right from the beginning, and we just kind of stayed in touch. And then we started talking about that maybe we'd do a collaboration where we'd put one of the CreatureCaster models into the Judgement game. Once we started talking about that with them, it became apparent that maybe there was a really good opportunity for us to make version 2 of Judgement. And they'd been thinking about certain changes for a while. They used to be 54 millimeter scale. Those are very expensive models. It made it difficult for them to sort of have a broader appeal, because if you wanted to make a warband, the minimum that you would need is 3 models. That's $150 US. So it was price prohibitive. So they wanted to maybe look at bringing the scale down. They were looking at the opportunities to move to hexes. It was something that would maybe make the game more dynamic, play faster. So, there were a bunch of big changes that they'd been looking at. And once we started talking with them, we were like, yeah, those are really good changes. It's going to make the game a lot better. We'd be really interested in partnering with you on this. So currently, CreatureCaster is handles all of the production, logistics, art. We do most of the lore and all of this, basically everything that's not rules related. So the thing that was most important to the Gunmeister team was that, they'd been writing rules for this game and balancing this game for the last 5 years, and they wanted to maintain the rights to do the balancing, write the rules, and do all of that type of thing. So they retain that. They're essentially a partnership with us, and they have the control of what the rules, and we have the rest of the products that we are maintaining and taking care of. It's very collaborative. We again meet with them all the time. We're talking about what's going to be good in the rules, what's going to be good in the sculpts. So at the end of the day, it's still a very collaborative process. They sort of have the last word on things to do with the rules. We have the last word on things to do with art style or how the miniatures are going to be sculpted.
Hmm.
But yeah, it's very much a teamwork, and we're super excited to be working with them. And it allowed us to bring a game to the market, which we probably would have been another 3 or 4 years developing on our own.
That's awesome. So, you had mentioned that they're going to be taking over kind of the rules development, and I know as part of the Kickstarter, one of the very like big stretch goals is doing like very competitive kind of champion. This is I think as far as I've been told, it's kind of based on like a MOBA style battle arena game, and it is fairly it's a one-on-one competitive game, I presume. Is there plans to have them continuously work on the game as far as like patches and updates? Because I think a lot of people, when they play games like, I play a lot of miniature war games, and I wish sometimes that they would get updated more often, or we get these kind of patches. So is there plans to kind of keep the game updated? Obviously you guys will be continuously releasing models, but from a rules perspective, is it going to be treated more like almost like an esport computer game where you're getting like more consistent patching, or and I know you guys have an app even in the works down as a stretch goal for the Kickstarter. So how does that all tie into kind of the broader ecosystem of Judgement?
Yeah, so I mean, this game has been played competitively with tournaments for the last 4 years, right? So it is really designed to be a competitive game. Andrew and Jeff are very competitive gamers, so everything is really well balanced, and balance is something that is going to be a continual focus. We're figuring out exactly how often, but we're looking at probably about a quarter patch, and along with those patches, we're going to have a model release or a scenario release or something that is going to generate value within the patch cycle. So you'll be buying potentially a scenario, or you'll be purchasing a new hero, and if there's any changes to any of the printed materials, you would receive that as part of the sort of purchase that you're getting within that sort of quarterly cycle. In addition to that, we are setting up a website where, if you played Magic the Gathering or something like that, they have their gatherer card set, and you go look at the card, and it has the frequently asked questions, and all the errata is built into that website. So that's what we're hoping most of the balance changes will be addressed during, through that FAQ, so that we don't have to change the printed material too often. But yeah, it's regularly going to be patched, regularly going to be balanced, and is designed really well for competitive play.
Right.
Some of the other stretch goals we had have been to add a little bit more casual play elements to it. So, we got like a battle royale that we've got 6 months of development that we're going to put into. We have the co-op mode, which it already works really well. If you just want to let your friend have a hero on your warband, and so you can play warband versus warband and just split the hero controls up between your friends.
Mm-hmm.
So we're developing that further, and we're going to make it so that even those systems are balanced and feel like you could play them competitively. So I think it's going to be, one of the things that we've done with the hexes simplifies things for when you're new to the game. You don't have to play around with measuring. You don't have to worry about that stuff. It makes it a lot easier to learn, but it also makes it way better in terms of a competitive environment, because now there is zero, little things that can go wrong and that people can complain about, or that there could be questions about. So it is a game that is designed perfectly for competition.
That's awesome. So tell me a little bit about, obviously you guys have incorporated a lot of the original Creature Caster background and models into the Judgement game. So what was that like, and how did you guys go about that process? Because I've been a huge fan of Creature Caster. I think I have about at least a half dozen of your various like demon models in my collection, and I've never, I've just used them in other games. But so it's exciting to hear that some of these models might be usable, transferable to Judgement. So how did that decision, obviously you guys have a big back catalog that obviously I'm sure you guys thought about getting involved, but like, what was that process like? And did that feel like a fairly natural thing, or did it take like a lot of kind of thought process to how to make it work, and it didn't feel like it was just kind of dumped in there?
Yeah, I mean, it was interesting. There was a lot of commonalities between, like the lore that Creature Caster has been developing, and a lot of that we haven't released to the public because it was all sort of things that we wanted to roll out as maybe part of our own game system. So we have like all these demon factions. They all have their own gods for each of the demons, and that's part of a bigger universe in which the demons play a really important role. They're not necessarily um, evil, for the sake of being evil. They're evil because they take extraneous universes and they melt them down into creational essence, and that gets pushed back into the forges of creation so that new universes can be spawned. So they play this really important role within the ecosystem of the multiverse, right? And that role is pretty horrible. They're exterminators. They come in and destroy entire universes. So you would perceive them as being evil if they're there destroying your universe, but intrinsically they're not intrinsically just evil for evil's sake, right?
Right.
They kind of are evil with a purpose.
They're like Thanos, they're just doing they're trying to bring some balance to the world,
Yeah, Thanos is a good one. So, we had like all this lore that we've been developing related to that, and some of it had a lot of parallel considerations with what Judgement was doing, like some of how what they were doing. But I think the biggest thing that we did was we knew that the demons were potentially going to invade this game, right? So we wanted that to be a story element. We wanted it to be dramatic. So we have all of the old gods of Judgement are killed off by the demon invasion as it tries to devour their universe, and the new gods then sort of who've been battling with the old gods for millennia are now sort of the last bastion, and they kind of have this uneasy alliance where they form this network that protects the entire planet, and it's made up of all these different effigies. And then all of a sudden one of the gods is like, well, I'd kind of like to control this entire network. And so that's what starts this war between the gods, and they're fighting over these effigies. They're willing to ally with some of the demons because anything that will help them gain control over this effigy network they're willing to do. And so they're basically in a battle amongst themselves for controlling this it's a protective sphere, but it's also a source of amazing power. So whoever ultimately gains control over over this network is going to be the ultimate deity of Athenian. So
that's awesome. So and correct me if I'm wrong, but let's talk plastic for a sec. This is the first time, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, that you guys have kind of delved into the world of injection molded plastic or plastic models. So what's that been like, especially because you guys are producing essentially two sets for Judgement. One that's going to be in kind of a classic resin, which is what you guys are known for, and then also a kind of a hard injection plastic, if I'm correct. Again, I think I've done my research, but if I'm wrong on any of this, please let me know. And so obviously a lot of the models they're basically similar sculpts, but slightly adjusted for that plastic process. So what was that like, first of all, deciding that, hey, we're going to do plastic? Because that's obviously a huge decision, it seems to me, for a miniatures company to kind of dip their toe in that world. And what's that been like? Like, has that been really challenging, or has it been fairly like straightforward? So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, there were some very difficult choices. It's the problem with resin is it is really labor intensive. You need skilled employees. It takes months to train those employees. It's really difficult to scale it into a bigger system. So, we were looking at it and we're saying, okay, what can we do here? Do we want to release this? I mean, even doing the Kickstarter was a big choice as well, right? Do we want to release it just a little bit at a time and do it in resin, or do we want to have sort of a product that we can get in front of a lot of people that can have a broad appeal? Because not everyone wants to spend an hour assembling a resin miniature, and they're delicate, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, if you're not used to playing with delicate models, then it shrinks your player base, right? You just don't have as many people who it can appeal to. At the same time, Creature Caster is a resin model company. People love our resin. People are used to getting resin from us. So, it's not the most cost effective to offer two different types of product line. But we felt that it was really important because of who we were, and then also for the markets that we wanted to appeal to, right? Because if we want this game to be played competitively on a much larger scale, which is what we're hoping we can grow it into, then you have to have something that can scale to that size. And so this option allows us to scale there. We were also really worried about, what sort of difference there would be between the quality, because we wanted to try and keep that as similar to what we produce as we possibly could. So we started looking into it, and originally I hated the idea. Like I don't like I don't like this PVC. It's going to be soft. And I don't particularly like those types of models. But we started getting some samples in. We started looking at the different options that were available, and we realized that we were able to produce this sort of hard plastic that looks really and feels pretty similar to what you might get in a GW sort of plastic kit, and that can handle the detail. We looked at what learning how the molds are made and the process that goes into it. And so for this particular type of product, they're made very similar to the molds we make for resin. So you take a master and you're essentially duplicating that master, but it's going to be in a metal mold, right? Whereas some of the products that come from GW, those are big steel blocks that get milled. So they're sort of done in a different method. So the detail that is captured from the master is theoretically identical, right? So you might not even be able to see the difference between the resin one and the PVC one. We are still on the phase where we have to make the molds. It's a big investment to make those molds. So we can't just show you like, hey, this is a PVC, this is a resin, they look the same. What we can show and what we're going to show is the master models. So when you metal mold, it's not flexible. Resin's all done in soft silicone molds. So you have a lot of flexibility in that mold. You can have really interesting poses. You can have some of those little details that maybe the Creature Caster miniatures are known for. You're going to lose a little bit of that when you move into that hard metal mold. The advantages are super durable. It's going to be pre-assembled. So if you're not a hobbyist, you can now just open your box, play the game. And I think the third thing is that it's, from our perspective, logistically, it can scale really well. So all of the expense for these types of hard molds, whether it's the ones that GW is making or this style with the PVC, it is, you're paying a lot for that initial mold, but the actual models that you make after that are quite cheap. So a resin model, doesn't matter if it's the first model we produce or if it's the 100,000th model we produce. The cost is the same, right? It's all in the labor. The molds don't last very long. They need to be destroyed and remade. It's never going to scale so that we are able to offer that at a better price when we're making more. So the PVC allows us to do that, and that's why I think we decided to do the Kickstarter, offer that, appeal to as many people as we can. If you're still really into that hobby aspect, you want to assemble your models, we're still going to continue to offer that. And I think that once we're able to show the PVC and the resin, people are going to become much bigger fans of what we're doing with the PVC.
That's awesome. And so do you imagine, now that you guys have gotten your toes a little bit wet with this plastic and you've maybe learned a lot more about this process, do you imagine that moving into the future that you guys might do more plastic beyond just Judgement? Because I assume you guys are still going to produce models for the regular kind of range, not just exclusively for Judgement. So do you imagine that that's something that you guys might experiment with or look into in the future? Or are you feeling that this is kind of like a thing that you are just really kind of focusing on for the Kickstarter and the Judgement game?
We're continuously expanding our resin production. So right now we still have the same plans for most of what's going on with our resin. We've increased our team 10 times, I think bigger over the last 2 years than it was. So, that is something that we're always chasing, and we're always trying to figure out like, how can we scale resin in a practical way, so that we can keep offering that. I think at a certain point of time, it starts making sense that maybe you want to look at the GW manufacturing method, which is still able to keep a lot of the details. But again, you do have to change a little bit of what's happening with your design. The next big thing for us is we are going to be releasing an infantry set in the next couple of months. And we're trying a different manufacturing method with that. It's using a COcast machine, and they have a different material. It's not resin. It's not like the high impact polystyrene that GW uses. It's something of a hybrid between those. It is not restic either, so it's basically a material that's pretty new to the market. And I think you're going to see it getting adopted by quite a few other companies. And what it does is allow you to make essentially silicone molds and use a plastic injection process into the silicone molds.
Oh,
So,
wow. That's cool.
yeah, so it's really interesting. It might work really well for our style of how we make miniatures, right?
Right.
With the undercuts, but sort of so that might allow us to scale a little bit more. We're going to try it with our infantry, see what customers think of it, see if they like it. If it's popular, we'll probably expand that to a few other things, and that might be an ideal solution for us, where we're essentially able to create the same look and feel of a resin miniature, but scale it better, right? So have molds that last longer, have manufacturing that takes less time. Those are the things that we're excited to try in the future and to see what the customer response to it is.
That's awesome. Yeah, it's I've always you always hear like plastic is like this huge investment. It's like a huge investment for miniature making. Like it's not like a small thing. It's like a huge, we're talking 6-7 figures of capital needed to set up that manufacturing process. So I can imagine it's not like a small decision. So speaking of the models for Judgement, now obviously I'd assume a lot of that, I guess, the IP from Judgement, came over with the game. And so a lot of the models, especially some of the races that we're seeing, they're a lot different than the traditional creature caster style, which I would describe as like very organic, very like, you mentioned kind of our demon range. Like you guys have always been kind of like demons and dragons and very organic style monsters. And now we're seeing, a lot more armor. We're seeing a little bit of chainmail on some of the models. So is there any plans to have maybe the broader creature caster range move into a direction where there's going to be more kind of like, not necessarily even like more of that, like kind of, I guess, like less organic look and more of like, and even potentially other styles of ranges. So I know obviously you guys do mostly fantasy, but there's obviously sci-fi. There's all sorts of other genres that are a little bit less organic. So is there ever plans to kind of look at those styles of sculpting and styles of like art direction now that you have a little bit more kind of in the family?
Yeah, I mean, so ultimately it's a lot about time, right? So we have tons and tons of ideas that we want to share. It's just a question of how quickly we can roll those ideas out. The greater creature caster universe as we see it, like within the demon realm, there's a lot of instability, and physics don't necessarily work quite the way they might work in a regular our reality. So there's sort of like a progression for those of the demons who live closest to sort of the material dimensions versus those who live the furthest away. And the ones who live the furthest away have no technology. The ones who live close to the interface between the two planes would be the most technologically advanced. And that's our tyranny faction, which we're really excited to share with people. It'll probably be something that we're exploring a lot next year. But they have a lot of tech. They have a lot of machines, and the only reason they haven't risen to complete ascendancy within the demon world is the further that they move away from that connection between the reality and their plane, the less their technology works. So they're really strong within that limited band of space, but as they move away from that, their technology starts to fail them. So we kind of have all these different ways that the demons interact with the human realm or just other realities. So we have all of that lore that's really interesting. You kind of see the orcs are already making a little bit of an appearance. We really like what we have planned for the sort of orc faction within that. In terms of Judgement, it was just awesome. Like we got to show people all the different things that we could sculpt. We got to show different ideas. We have been really focused on demons because we want to present and can do a complete package, right? So that's where a lot of our time is being spent, is because we want that to look really polished. We want to have all of those factions filled out before we move on to other things, and it just takes time. So we are super excited to complete the demons. We're super excited that we get to do new stuff with Judgement and have fun with that, and we're also excited about all the other ideas we have beyond demons as well. So yeah, there's lots to come from Creature Caster.
That's awesome. And I'm super excited to see it. I've been, as I said, I've been a big fan, following you guys closely for a very long time. Judgement Eternal Champions, guys, is the Kickstarter. I'm going to be putting links below in the various channels. I've been talking to Peter Adams. Peter, thanks so much for your time. It's been great talking to you. And I learned a lot, and I hope our audience learned a lot as well. And make sure to check out the Kickstarter and check out Creature Caster's website as well if you just want to see kind of some of the other stuff they do. So with that said, thank you, everyone, and we'll have a good day. So.